Hey there, folks. Welcome to Sustainable Sedition Radio, a podcast that's dedicated to helping you and myself build a life that thrives in changing times. And this week, we're going to be kicking it off with episode 13. And this week, I'm just kind of going on the fly. I don't really have too much of a crazy topic in mind. I've been going through the ringer. We just had our third child about 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago. And man, I'm exhausted. We are both exhausted. Our 1-year-old son is, his molars are coming in, so he is just grumpy and has had a hard time adjusting to, hey, there's this new guy on the boob over here. What the hell's he doing here? And, this is my turf. He does really good for the most part, but it's been a really, as you can imagine, challenging adjustment for a 1-year-old. And then, the new guy, he's got a great little attitude. He's healthy. He's strong. But man, he is a screamer. And, his sleep cycle has been like, he sleeps all day, right? He's either asleep or breastfeeding all day. And then the moment that we get our 1-year-old down and it's time for us to go to sleep, he's like up and at it for hours. So that's what we've been kind of dealing with. And, I've been kind of scattered over the past couple weeks. My routine's been off. I've been on paternity leave and just doing some work around the property, trying to keep busy as much as I can, trying to be here and support my lady and, kind of take the reins with my 1-year-old while she adjusts to having a newborn again, while she's dealing with the postpartum stuff that a woman goes through after giving birth. And I'm just doing my best. I'm looking forward to getting back to work, however. I'm looking forward to getting back in my routine, getting back in the swing of things, getting back to having episodes on time every week. So if you're wondering why we haven't had our episodes released every Monday as per usual, that would be why. So again, I'm really looking forward to getting back into that rhythm. But this week, I'm going to kind of take you guys through what's been going through my head over these past couple weeks while I'm just frankly completely overwhelmed with all the stuff that we're trying to do, all the projects and fatherhood, being a supportive partner, being somebody that wants to, is very ambitious and has a lot of goals and a vision for my life and for my future and for the future that I want for my kids and hopefully the future that we can contribute to as a family that touches everyone else and touches our community and the world at large. So I'm just going to come up with a title. This week's episode, we're going to call it A Young Father's Take on Resilient Lifestyle Design. And I think that kind of sums up where I want to go with today's episode. I'm 29 years old. I first became a dad when I was 23. That was when my daughter was born. Her mother and I are not together anymore, but we have, a solid relationship, co-parenting. We live up here in the mountains about 45 minutes away from town, and we have split time with my daughter, who's going to be 6 on Sunday, actually, so wish her a big happy birthday. And we've got everything's cordial. It took a little while to get there, but that's just one of the many things that I've got on my plate. And it wasn't really until I had her come into my life, my daughter, to where I really started to pull my head out of my ass and stop acting like a juvenile idiot. I was kind of a wild teenager. I grew up in upstate New York, actually near Buffalo, some of you know, underneath Lake Ontario, in a place called Rochester, New York. And I was, a wild teenager. I went around and, partied and drank and smoked and, did a bunch of drugs and moved out to California, kind of continued with that lifestyle for a few years, traveled around, met some cool people on my travels, learned a lot of cool things, but wasn't really applying it in any definitive direction until I had my daughter. And then it was life kind of just slaps you in the face when you have a kid, and it kind of gives you a whole different lens to look at the world through. And if your head's in the right place, at least that's what it'll do. And so I started taking things a little bit more seriously. Started working seriously. Started my own handyman service because I'm just the kind of guy that doesn't really like to work under somebody else's thumb. And it's not necessarily about pride. It's just that I like to do things for myself. I like to be in charge of my own time. I like to be in charge of my own finances. I like to be running the show. I like to be running my own show. So I started that up, and that led me to having to figure out how the hell a business works. How to track my income, how to track my expenses, how to make sure that it balances all out at the end and that I have a little something left over for myself. And, I'm out here in California by myself. Up until I met my current partner, who we have our two sons together. I didn't have any family up here. My mother and my stepfather live in New York, and then my father lives in Arizona. And so it's just me figuring it out. I didn't have a lot of guidance, and I just had to figure it out as I went on the fly. And there are a lot of great things that can come from doing things like that. But it's also very challenging because, you are ultimately in charge of every success and every mistake that you make. And the majority of my successes were earned by making at least twice the amount of mistakes that it took to get a single win. So my hope is to not come at this like I'm some, wise guy who's 50 years old and has everything figured out and, can show you this perfect laid out path that's going to help you gain success. This podcast is me explaining my journey and hopefully giving you some insight into the things that work for me and into the many things that have not. Now, before we go any further, if you enjoy the show, if you enjoy what we do here at Sustainable Sedition, feel free to, wherever you listen, please take a second and give me a quick rating, leave a quick review. You can listen to all the episodes also at the website at sustainablesedition.com, and there you can find a page that'll let you subscribe to our email list, so you never miss an episode, and you'll get updates from me every single week about projects that I'm working on going forward, of which there are many in the works. At the same time, if you ever want to communicate with me directly, you can email me at calvin@sustainablesedition.com. I love hearing back from you guys. I love getting feedback. I love answering questions, and I love engaging with my audience and getting ideas for topics for episodes. All right, so let's dig into the meat of our episode here. We live in a time where we are just absolutely saturated up to our eyeballs with, financial gurus and self-help, nonsense and fluff and, people who are, follow my 10-step program, buy my guide and, all this stuff. A lot of it's garbage. A lot of it's just fluff. There's so much stuff out there that just has no substance and has nothing real at its core that is really going to be valuable to you in your life. Now, I'm the type of guy where I recognize that not all of the things that I've learned in my life are going to be immediately applicable to you and yours. Everybody has totally different circumstances, different situations. Sure, some of our circumstances can, overlap, and there can be commonalities where some of the things that I have learned can be beneficial to you, but that's pretty rare. So what I like to do is I like to come at things from a perspective of principles that can be applied over, every different set of circumstances that are out there, because the principle remains the same. So in this episode, I'm not really going to be talking to you about like parenting techniques or, how to be a good father or anything like that. I'm going to be talking about the mindset that it takes in order to be a successful parent, a successful adult, and a successful partner. Somebody who you can go to sleep at the end of the night. You can think about what you did that day. You can think about what you did 10 years from now, looking back, and you can be proud of the life that you've lived as the type of person that you showed up as. Now, the odds are really stacked against young people today. They really are. We live in very tumultuous economic times. Things are politically and socially all over the place. Democrats versus Republicans, left versus right, black versus white, gender ideology, all the DEI, racism, all the different things. People are divided on every single line. It's hard to be able to see through and hear through the noise, a real signal. And it's hard to get your bearings straight and figure out, what the fuck is true. It's hard to figure out where to get accurate information from. And it's even harder yet to figure out, what are you going to do about it? It's so easy to get just completely overwhelmed, completely overstimulated, and shut down and kind of go into revert into a victim mentality, and be like, man, I'm just fucked. Everything's screwed. I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm never going to be able to attain that. I'm never going to be able to achieve this goal. I'll never buy a house. I'll never have success. But one thing that I've learned in my life through adopting that attitude and then having to crawl my way out of having that attitude is that attitude, that victim mentality, is the only way that you make it positively certain that you will never buy a house, that you will never have success, that you will never have the life that you're wanting to build. So the first thing you got to ask yourself, the first principle, is you got to stop telling yourself that you can't do things. And you got to start asking yourself, how can I achieve this goal? Start looking around. Take inventory of what you have in your life. What's your income look like? What do your expenses look like? Do you have opportunities to lower your expenses, to lower your living expense? Do you really, really need that, Netflix subscription? Do you really need 5 different streaming subscriptions? Do you really need to be ordering Uber Eats and going out for drinks 5 nights a week with your buddies? Do you really need to go and get freaking Starbucks every single day before work, right? We all know the answer to that question. Obviously, none of us want to give shit up that we enjoy. But the reality is that in order to get what you want long term, you're going to have to sacrifice the less important things in the short term. And a lot of times, that means sacrificing some level of comfort, some level of luxury. Because trying to live a life of luxury when you can't really afford it, that's living outside of your means. And that's always, always, always going to keep you broke and struggling and feeling miserable and feeling like a victim to circumstance and to everything that's going on around us. And I am the first guy to admit guilt in that mismanagement of my own lifestyle and of my own finances. There were so many years where I was just smoking and drinking and spending all this money on all this stuff, going and buying clothes and gadgets and a new radio and God knows what else, stuff that I don't even have today that I wish I had. Every penny that I spent on all this shit that I don't have anymore because it wasn't important. And after, so long of doing that and then having a kid is when it really kind of kicked in. It really actually wasn't until my son was born that I started to really take saving seriously. Was that I started to recognize that I needed to find a way to pay myself first. Now, there's a book that I read recently that actually I was turned on to by a guy named Jack Spirko. Some of you might know him. He runs the Survival Podcast. He's a big mentor of mine, even though he has no idea who I am. But the name of the book is called The Richest Man in Babylon. And it's a fantastic book. I highly, highly recommend that you guys go and read it. I know it's on Spotify as an audiobook. You could probably find it on YouTube, I'm not sure. Order, a paperback copy. But the essence of the book, and I'm not going to give you like a whole book summary today. Maybe we'll do that in a future episode. But in essence, this book is based on clay tablets that were found in the ruins of ancient Babylon. And these clay tablets, they were full of poetry and mythology and the stories and the history of Babylon, right? But they were also at the same time full of like the personal memoirs of everyday people. And what they found while translating these tablets, which were, basically like wet clay that they inscribed writing into, and then they baked them into these hard tiles. They're about, 6 inches wide by 8 inches tall by like an inch thick, right? Thousands and thousands and thousands of them they found. And what they found was that people writing about, the debts that they owed and their struggles in their marriages and raising kids and like the same stuff that we're dealing with today over 5,000 years ago. So not much has changed. As they say, there's nothing new under the sun. And anyway, in one of the stories that this book goes into is about this guy who racks up a bunch of debt. He's borrowing money from lenders, from his friends, from family members, from businessmen, from everybody, right? And he can't pay anyone back. So eventually he kind of gets run out of town. Nobody trusts him. Nobody wants to do business with him. Nobody wants to let him borrow anymore, that's for sure. So he goes out and he starts robbing camel trains, stealing people's gold, stealing camels, kind of becomes a bandit. And he sends his wife off to go live with her father because he can't take care of her. Well, he gets in trouble doing all this robbing and stealing. And he ends up getting sold into slavery to, I think, the Syrians, right? So now he's this Syrian slave, and he's all down on his luck. He's hard on himself. He's not having a good time. And after a while of talking to his slave owner, who was a woman, she was, I think, a princess or something like that, he starts to kind of have a change of heart after their conversations, where she basically tells him that if you had the soul of a free man, you wouldn't be living like a slave. And that a slave only thinks of borrowing and doesn't think of repaying his debts. Eventually they have this, whole exchange, and she decides to free him because she sees this, this spark of a free man in him. She gives him a camel, sends him on his way across the desert back to Babylon. He has this whole spiritual revelation on his way back through the desert, where he almost dies on his way to Babylon, right? And he has this moment with himself where he's like, I have this amazing opportunity now, and I see things clearly that I have been acting like a freaking slave, and that's why my life went the direction that it did. And now I'm going to go back to Babylon and repay all my debts and prove to myself and to everybody else that I am indeed a free man. And so that's what he does. He goes back to Babylon. He starts working, and he starts getting back in touch with all the people that he owes money. And he starts to slowly, one at a time, bit by bit, every month, chip away at all the debts that he owes. And it's a crazy story. It's a crazy story. And the fact that this was all written down on these clay tablets from thousands of years ago is I thought it was really profound. I thought it was really cool. And in the end, he pays off all his debts, reclaims his wife, builds a beautiful, abundant, prosperous life for himself, and ends up as this widely respected, successful merchant with a great reputation, and repairs all his relationships with the people he'd broken them with. And this is one of 3 or 4 different stories with a very similar arc that are in this book that all have this common code that was being talked about back in Babylon. And it was basically, they called it the 7 laws of gold. And these were 7 principles that allowed these men to either raise themselves up out of poverty or make a comeback after they had fallen so far that they ended up sold into slavery. So the first principle is to pay yourself first. Keep a tenth, that's 10% of everything that you earn. So, you get a paycheck, it's $260. 10% of that is $26. Same thing for if you got $5,000. Take $500 out, put it away for yourself, pay yourself first. That should be the first transaction that you make every single time you get paid, no matter how big, no matter how small. If you make $1, take 10 cents, put it away. I started doing this myself about, I want to say 8 or 9 months ago, in earnest, serious, because I had dabbled with it before, but then it's like, oh yeah, I got a little money, now I'm going to go and spend it on this fucking thing that I want. And that never works out. You end up broke again. So I started really taking this seriously about 8 or 9 months ago, and I was able to stack up enough money for myself to be able to stay home and actually take a paternity leave from work and be able to take care of my family for a month and be here as a support for my lady. And I don't have a job where, I can just take a leave of absence and, either get paid or come back or whatever. It's like, I know I run my own handyman service, so it's all on me. I don't have benefits. I don't have anything like that going on. So I have to take that management of my money into my own hands and take it seriously. And doing that, taking just 10% of everything that I've made over the past, half a year and some change has made all the biggest difference to me in my life. Now, the second principle is don't confuse wants with needs and learn to live below your means. I think somewhere in these stories, they basically lay it out that your living expenses should not exceed 7/10 or 70% of all your earnings. A lot of us, that sounds ludicrous. That sounds crazy. But you know what, man? The reality is that the majority of us, if we really wrote it down and got on paper and got serious, we could find ways. Whether that means we have to move into, a smaller apartment and downsize, do stuff that we don't want to do, make the sacrifices to live within that 70%, we could do it. The majority of people won't. The majority of people are too addicted to, convenience and this false sense of luxury that comes from taking all the money that you earn and immediately going and spending it on the most shiny thing. And again, I've done it. I've been there. But if I had kept on that path, I sure as hell wouldn't be where I'm at right now. Being up here on this land is my downgrade in expenses. My rent up here, because it is so far away out of town, allows me to live within that 70%. And sure, there are a lot of other expenses. The gas alone to get back and forth to town is crazy. The roads are not paved, and it's, rocky mountain roads, twisting and turning. It beats the hell out of the vehicles, so there's that expense. But all in all, when you balance out the amount that I'm bringing in and the amount that I'm paying to live here and to keep everything going, I'm within that 70%. Most months. Every once in a while, something goes sideways, but that's just life. And again, these are guidelines. These are goals. They're not concrete laws, If you can do 80%, if that's the best you can do right now, do it. If you can do 50%, if you can live on 50% of your earnings, do it, I would love to be in your position. Absolute best wishes. Good for you. And again, this goes back to what are we spending money on that isn't necessary, that isn't really adding lasting value to your life, especially if you've got kids. Is your Starbucks addiction making it so that you're not going to have something to leave behind for them? And obviously that's a ridiculous example, but that's the way we got to be thinking about this stuff. And if you don't have kids, is your Starbucks addiction going to be the difference between you being able to, retire with some solid assets or not? Because I guarantee you, if you started taking that $5 that you're buying Starbucks with every day and put that $5 into something like Bitcoin, do that for 10 years, and then tell me where you're at. Come and thank me later. Now, number 3, make your gold multiply. So this comes a little bit later on. Once you've been doing your 10%, your 1/10 for a while and saving that up. And the first thing you should do always is to build that 10% up until you have at least 3 months, 90 days of all of your living expenses covered. And that's going to be like your emergency savings. And that's what I did. And that's how I was able to have this paternity leave. But once you have that established, and that might take you a year, it might take you 5 years. It's about the long game. Building wealth is slow and it's boring. Really, it is. And once you have that emergency fund, now you have a buffer for if something goes wrong. And you can start taking that 10%, and instead of putting it into that emergency fund, you can start taking it, building up another pile until you have a chunk to invest. And now you're going to take that and you're going to invest into something that is going to make your money work for you. It's going to make you more money, even if it's pennies to start with. And I'm not like super well versed on investing. Frankly, I'm not there yet. I do put money into Bitcoin. I have I'm not going to tell you how much, but I have a small but growing amount that I put into Bitcoin every single week, because I truly believe that is one of the strongest assets that we can be investing in today. I think it's the 5th most valuable asset in the world at this point, underneath like Apple stocks and Amazon. I think it's neck and neck with Amazon right now, if I'm not mistaken. But if you follow the trends with Bitcoin, man, it's just going up and up and up and up and up. And, we'll have to do an episode on Bitcoin as I continue to learn a little bit more about it and be able to explain to you why it's valuable. Today's not going to be a Bitcoin episode, but find a way to make your dollars multiply. Invest them wisely. Now, number 4 is guard your treasures from loss. So that means don't take stupid risks. Obviously an example would be, don't take half your life savings and go try and like gamble it at a casino and try to double it or something. Don't take it and go bet on the horse races. Don't take financial advice from your buddy who wants you to invest on something with him that he doesn't know anything about, or start a business with your friend in an industry that he has no experience in. Don't just take blind risks, Seek wisdom from people with experience who can tell you whether or not it's a really good idea before you invest any of your gold, any of your dollars, any of your Bitcoin, whatever, into any type of asset. Make sure that you know that investment is going to be bulletproof to the best of your ability. Number 5, make your dwelling a profitable investment. Now in the book, this talks about owning your home and making it an asset, not a liability. So right now, man, I am not in a position to tell you need to own a home. I don't own a home. I'm working my ass off to try and to get there. Tell you what, though, my cousin who lives in Colorado, who's 2 years younger than me, does the same thing I do, a lot of handyman work. He just bought his first house. Him and his new wife, they just bought their first house. And, he had a little bit of an earlier start with getting his shit together because he didn't go traveling and doing drugs for 5 years of his life in his early 20s, late teens. So, he's gotten there a little bit sooner than I have, but my attitude towards that is just fucking good for you, dude. I wish that I would have taken shit more seriously when I was younger and was like really working. And, I don't regret the path that I took. It taught me valuable lessons that I needed to learn from me. And I'm the kind of guy that, unfortunately, like a lot of us, needs to learn the hard way sometimes. But the point is that so many people in my generation, I guess I would be considered like an older millennial. I'm not quite what is it, Gen Z? I'm not quite in that grouping, so I'm an or younger millennial. I don't fucking know, dude. It's the generations, whatever, they're confusing. But anyway, so many people in my generation are like, I'll never buy a home, I'll never own a home. And it's like, yeah, dude, you're not gonna with that fucking attitude. And that's the reality of it. I hate to be all like tough love, pull yourself up by your bootstraps with anybody, but like there's value in that. And yeah, times are tough. Times have always been tough. There have been busts and booms, and the tides are always changing. But the reality is that no generation hasn't had to work for what they got. Even, everybody who is like, oh, the boomers had it so easy. It's like, no, they didn't. Their interest rates were like 18%. That's crazy high. They had to deal with all kinds of shit that's just as difficult, if not more difficult, than the situation that we find ourselves in today, in 2025. And I'll tell you what, they didn't have the internet with an infinite number of options, damn near infinite number of options, to find ways to create businesses, to create products, to network. So in reality, we are living in one of the best times for adopting an entrepreneurial mindset and getting out there and finding some other way to make you money, other than, just going and getting a job at Chick-fil-A or something. So I'm not over here trying to tell you that you need to own a home, right? But what I am saying, and is the name of this principle is, make your dwelling a profitable investment. Not all of us can own a home right now, but we can all find ways to make our homes, whether we're renting, whatever, profitable for us. We can find a way to make it produce for us. One of my favorite things that I've ever heard is again, by Jack Spirko. He has this whole, tiff about moving from home to homestead. And that's transforming your home into something that produces for you. If you just have a house that you're just paying the mortgage and whatever, but it's not producing anything for you, you think you have an asset, but that's really a liability. It's a money sink. Now, if you take that home that you're paying a mortgage on and you find a way to grow food, have some backyard chickens, sell the eggs, start a, tool fixing business out of your garage, whatever, find a way to turn wherever you live into a place that you generate profit from. That's literally what I've been talking about this whole time when I'm talking about homesteading, when I'm talking about producing off of your own land, when I'm talking about growing cabbage in your garden and making a bunch of sauerkraut, when I'm talking about raising meat rabbits or quail in your freaking garage or your little side lot. You could be growing mushrooms in your closet and selling them out at the farmer's market to your buddy who has a booth. There are a million things that we could do, even in a small apartment. Now, if you do own a home, you're in an awesome position, because unless you live in somewhere like an HOA, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can turn your backyard into a freaking, food forest if you wanted to. You could turn it into a little micro homestead, depending on how much land you have. And if you do live in an HOA, there are things like meat rabbits and quail that are quiet, that your neighbors are never going to be the wiser to, if you keep things, on the hush-hush. You're never going to have, Karen Blue Hair coming and complaining because she, heard a rooster squawking over the fence. So when it talks about making your home a profitable investment, that's what it means here. It's not necessarily that you have to own a home, but wherever you live, make it produce something for you of value that can add to your overall net worth. Number 6 is ensure a future income. You're going to want to build streams of income that are going to feed you when you can't go out there and swing a hammer anymore. When you get old, God forbid you get hurt at work. And you're either, out for 6 months while your femur heals that you cracked in half, or maybe you fall off a ladder and you break your hip and now you're disabled and you can't work. Having systems of redundancy and passive income are going to allow you so much more freedom later on in life, and in the event that something bad happens and you have to pivot the trajectory of your whole life. The most classic example of that is, you buy your first home, it's a beater, you fix it up, make it more valuable, right? Keep working, keep saving, buy a second home, fix that one up, and rent one of them out. Now you have that income stream. And there are a million other examples just like that. Especially today with the internet. People are out here creating content with AI and selling it to influencers and making tens of thousands of dollars a month doing just that. So yes, build streams of income and systems that will continue to feed you when you can no longer work. Next and last, increase your ability to learn. This is probably the most important one. Always be learning, sharpening your skills. The more you know, the more things you know how to do, the more you're going to be able to recognize opportunities when they come. And they do. You just might not see them all the time because you don't know what you're looking at, because you don't know how to, do a certain thing. You don't know how to manage your money. You don't know how to take advantage of a business partnership, whatever it may be. Always be learning. Take jobs, not for how much money that you can earn from them, but by how much you can learn from them. Is this job going to teach me a new skill that I can use to add more value into my life? And I don't care what it is. It could be working at Chick-fil-A. It could be going and joining a road crew. It could be going and laying brick like I grew up doing. It could be working as a landscaper. It could be sweeping floors at a mechanic shop until you learn how to, they let you in there, teach you how to change someone's oil or how to change out an axle. Anything. Like, the opportunities are there, guys. They're there. They're out there. We've just been programmed to sit by and let them pass, and to play the victim, and to cry in our own puddle of tears, and to sit there and wail and splash around and wait for someone to save us. I think this younger generation is one of the most entitled generations that we've ever had. And it's sad because we have so much more potential for success than any generation before us. Look at the tools that we have at our fingertips. We're walking around with supercomputers in our pockets, for God's sakes. We have AI. We have YouTube. We have all these amazing tools that 2 generations ago, people would have jumped at the opportunity to be in the spot that you're in right now. Between 2025 and 2035, we are going to see an absolute quantum leap in society, both technologically, socially, economically, all of it. We're living through the biggest stage of flux, probably in all of human history, probably larger than the one between the Industrial Revolution and World War II. And it's going to happen fast. It's already happening. We're right in the middle of it right now. And it's going to keep speeding up and speeding up and speeding up. And if we don't get out there and start learning how to utilize these tools, we're going to be left behind. I know that it's easy to feel hopeless, watching the news, hearing about all the wars, hearing about, Trump did this asinine thing and the Democrats did this stupid thing, and, everybody's a fucking moron. Everything's totally mismanaged. You're never going to be able to buy a house, and everything's fucked. You should just give up. It's really easy to let yourself believe that. And you want to know who benefits the most from you believing that about yourself and about your life? The fucking idiots who are the ones mismanaging everything. Those are the guys, the ones that you're mad at, that benefit from you sitting on your ass and not actualizing your full potential as a human being. Now, you might not be, an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos. You might not be the guy who can run the fastest mile, right? But you can run a mile. Guaranteed. If you started today, within a month or a couple months, no matter how out of shape you are right now, you could find a way to run a mile. And it's the same principle when it comes to building success in your life. Stop looking to these guys who have all the bells and whistles as the definition of success, and define your own definition of success. Because there's always going to be people that are better than you at shit. There's always going to be people that are better than me at podcasting, at homesteading, at doing all the things that I want to do, that I'm passionate about in my life. But if I allow myself to get discouraged because I'm not the best podcaster, or I'm not the best this or the best that, and I allow that to make me quit, I'll never know how far I could go. And maybe, just maybe, if I keep going, maybe one day I'll be at Joe Rogan's level, you know? I don't know. I'm not saying it's gonna happen. I'm also not saying that it's impossible either. And the same goes for you and your vocation and whatever it is that you choose to do with your life. You just got to start doing it. You got to take it seriously. Take yourself seriously. You're so much more valuable. And you have so much more to contribute than what they taught you in school, than what they tell you on social media, than what they tell you on the news, and that your asshole boss thinks of you at work. You set your own parameters for success. And you are the only one who can choose to start taking steps that'll allow you to achieve those goals that you've set for yourself or not. All right. I think that's a wrap for episode 13. I think that's a good place to stop. And again, seriously, go listen to that audiobook. Go buy the book off, Amazon or wherever. The Richest Man in Babylon. I promise you, it will change your life. It will change the way that you look at money, at your self-worth, at your relationships, and at what's possible for your future. And again, guys, if you enjoy the show, please reach out to me, Calvin@sustainablesedition.com. Tell me you enjoyed it. Tell me you didn't. Drop me a like, drop me a rating, drop me a comment, leave a review, wherever you're listening. Share it with a friend. If anything that we talked about today struck a chord in you that you feel like someone you know needs to hear, please send it right to them. And it does me way more of a favor than I could tell you. Now, the only other favor that I'm going to ask of you is that you do yourself a favor. And that you start paying yourself first. You don't confuse your wants with your needs. You invest. And you make your money work for you. You don't take stupid risks. You make your home profitable for you. You prepare for the future. And you keep on learning. Keep on growing. And keep on building a life that thrives in changing times.